Welcome to the Brass Hand Woodwind Shop. This is the 10th video in the Restoring a Bass Trombone series. I love working on instruments, but I love variety and I love getting things finished. I'm looking forward to getting this instrument finished. It will only be 3 solder joints to put the Handslide back together, but they're very important solder joints and they take a long time to set up and to get them just right. The 3 solder joints are the 2 for the crook that goes right there, and then only 1 solder joint to put the inner hand slide back together. I'm going to start with soldering the crook onto the outer hand slide, but before I get started I need to make sure that these slides are parallel and that they're not skewed. To make sure that the 2 outer hand slides are parallel, I have a calipers, so what I'm going to have to do is remove this. Okay, let's see what this one is. Yes, that needs to go in. So I'm going to bend that in a little bit. I have the calipers set right near the brace, and it should be the same up at the top. Okay, I bent that in way too far, so I'm going to have to bend it out a little. And this brace seems to be very soft. It is bending very easily. Let's see. Okay, I think it needs to open up a little more. I'm just going to keep doing this until these slides are parallel. The slides are parallel now, so I can put the crook on there. Let's see, sometimes, okay, that looks good. Sometimes the crook can be open too far or not far enough, so that looks good though, so I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to check it again to see if anything shifted. Okay, it looks like it needs to come apart a little bit. This is not soldered on yet, but I'm going to pull it apart, and what that will do is it will open up the crook just a little bit. I still need to open this up a little farther. These are not off very much. They're pretty close. It's just a few thousandths of an inch, but it's enough to cause problems, and I want the slide to be as good as possible. So I'm going to work on this until these are parallel. I have been trying to bend this for the last few minutes, and it's not changing much. So what I'm going to do is take this off, and then I'm going to bend it apart using a little leverage. I have 2 trombone slide mandrels, and I'm going to put one in one end of the crook and the other in the other end, and I'm going to spread that apart a little bit. Not enough to damage anything, but just enough to open it up a tiny little bit. And then I will try it and see if it is good. Okay, I still need to bend it a little bit more. This one is not bending easily. I'm going to bend it apart a little bit more, using a little more force this time. Not a lot of force, but enough to at least bend it a little bit. Try it again. I finally got these slide tubes parallel, so the next thing to do is to see if they are skewed. Not parallel is when the slides are away from each other like this, and skewed would be when they are twisted like this. If either of those are bad, the slide will not work well. So what I'm going to do next is make sure that these slides are not skewed. And there are 2 different ways of doing that. You can close one eye and line up the slide so that you can just barely see the bottom one under the top one. Keeping it straight, you move your eye down. You don't move your head, just your eye. And then look down here and see if it's the same. And if you can see too much of this slide at the bottom, then the bottom slide needs to get bent this way. If you don't see enough, the slide needs to get bent the other direction. So I'm going to try that and see what I have. It looks like I see too much slide here, so it needs to get bent this way a little bit. And there is another way to do this, and that's using the block. This is a granite block, and it's very heavy, and there's a very flat surface on it, and you can set the slide on that to see if it is skewed. I have a little bench vise that I'm going to put this in to hold on to it. Now I'm going to set this down there. So what I do is I hold the one end down very lightly, and then tap the other sides. When it makes the tapping noise, that means that the slide is not touching right there, this slide does not tap because it is touching. So that means that this side needs to get, the bottom side needs to get bent this way, and the top side needs to get bent this way. I don't know exactly how this is going to work. I did not do this very often with a tunable Handslide trombone. I may need to take off this section of slide and just do it with this one, and then put this on and then straighten this one out if it needs it. I'm not sure. So I'm going to see if it will bend like that. And again, I do not have the crook soldered on yet. I'm leaving that unsoldered until I get everything perfect, and then I will solder it. Okay, it's still way off. I'm thinking I'm going to need to remove this. Okay. Now it should bend a lot easier without that there, so I'm going to try not to go too far. Let's see what happened. Still really bad. I may just have to take the crook off and do it this way, and then put the crook on. And this will probably also mess up the how parallel the slide is, so I'm going to have to do that over again too. But that's the way things are with trombone slides. You usually do things several times before it's right. Okay, that's getting close. It's closer than it was. So I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to do that until it's parallel. The slide is not tapping at all. So that is good. The slide is parallel. Now I'm going to put this section on and see what happens. I do not know if this is the part that was causing the problem or not. It may be, but I'll try it out. Oh yeah, that's way off. Okay, so now what I have to do is make sure that it's parallel when this is on. This part is way off, so I'm going to have to unsolder this and then twist it a little bit until it's parallel, and also that it's open the right amount. But I'm not going to do that now though. I'm going to wait on that, and I think what I'm going to do is just get this part of the slide together, put the crook on so that everything is parallel and not skewed. After I'm done with that, I'm going to put the tuning mechanism on there, and that should be very easy. After I do that, I probably just heat up the solder joint. It will probably shift to where it's supposed to be very easily. And also I can see that there is some solder right there, so that tells me that this probably has been unsoldered before, and when it was unsoldered, it probably was not soldered back together correctly. I'm going to do this part later, and I'm going to solder the crook on there now. So I'm getting that set up. Okay, that's good. And again, I'm going to check to see if this is parallel with each other or not, because things can change when you do anything to a slide. It can cause things to change. And even if it's something little that you think would not cause something else to change, it probably will change. So you just need to keep doing what you need to do to make sure that the slide is the way it's supposed to be. Okay, there's a gap there and no gap here. So that means that I need to, this needs to open up a little bit farther. I think I got it now. I'm going to check it one more time. Okay, that is good. And okay. So that is good. Now I'm ready to solder this. Now I'm ready to solder, and I've done a lot of soldering videos in the past, so I'm going to go through this kind of quickly here. And I'm going to leave links to other soldering videos if you want to watch more about soft soldering. You can watch those. Okay, these joints heat up very quickly because the metal is so thin. I just need to make sure that the solder goes all the way around. Okay, that one is good. Now the other one. Okay, heat it up and then put some flux on it. And then you continue to heat it up. And usually about the time the flux starts to boil, that's about the time when it's heated up enough to go into the solder joint. Okay, that should be good. So I'm going to wait for that to harden. Should just take a few seconds. There we go. Whenever you solder on the tubing, it is a good idea to test to see if the solder joint went all the way around, because if it does not go all the way around, then it will leak. So the way I do that is cover up the water key with a finger, cover up one of the slides with my thumb, and then blow into it. Okay, that is good. It does not leak, so those solder joints are good. I do just need to clean up a little bit of solder right there. I got a little too much solder into that joint. So I'm going to clean that up and then it should be good. The way I clean up solder is first I neutralize the flux. And the flux is acidic, so this is ammonia that I put on there, and that neutralizes the acid. The reason you do that is so the acid stops eating away at the lacquer. It does not really affect the brass much. I mean, maybe a tiny little bit, but it does affect the lacquer, and also it can turn the metal green. Another reason why is when I heat this up to clean up the solder, if the flux is still on there, then the solder will stick to the rest of the metal where I do not want it to stick. The way I clean up the solder is I heat it up till it melts, and then I wipe it off with a rag, like that. Then I do that until it is clean. And now I got all the solder off of that. After you heat and wipe up the solder, there will always be a very thin layer of solder that's still left on there. And you can buff that off. It buffs right off very easily. I'm checking to see if the slides are still parallel. I'm going to do that the same way I set up the slide in the first place. It's very close, but not quite. This, for whatever reason, this went in. So what I'm going to do is spread the crick apart again. And it was only a tiny little bit that it needed it, so I think it will be okay. I'm not sure how this shifted, but it did shift just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is heat up the joints just enough to melt them. And then what I'm doing right here is I'm pushing on the slide a little bit, and that should open it up just enough. Now I'll do the other one. Okay. Now I'm going to wait for this to cool, but it should only take a couple seconds. Then I'll check it out again. Let's see what we have here. Okay, that's good. It just was a tiny little bit off. Now I'm going to check to see if it's skewed. It is good. So this slide is good. Now what I'm going to do is straighten out this slide. So this slide was unsoldered before, and then when it was soldered together, it was soldered together very skewed. Since these slides are parallel and not skewed, when I heat this joint up, it should shift so that it puts it back into like it should be. So I'm going to heat that up and wait for the solder to melt. Should be hot enough. I don't see it melt. Oh, yeah, there we go. That's good. So now I'm just going to turn that off, wait for a few seconds, and I'll try this. Okay, I think this is better. At least it seems to be better now. It is slightly off, but not much. I can probably just do the rest by hand. Okay, that's good now. I'm going to put that on there, and this should be good. It slides without any problem, so I think that is going to be fine now. Now what I need to do is set up the inner slide. So I'm going to put this back on here. If you remember from the last video, this slide tube worked one way, but you turn it and it did not work as well the other way. So I'm going to check this out and make sure I solder it in the right direction so that it works the best. Okay, it does not work like that. I'm turning the inner slide tube to find the way that it works the best. Okay, like that. So I'm going to solder it in like that. Just like I did on the tuning mechanism, since these slides are parallel and they're not skewed, I should be able to just solder these together and they should be fine. The only thing is, there's one thing I forgot to do. There's some cork in here, and if I push the slides in all the way and there's cork in this one but not in this one, they're not going to solder together evenly, so I need to pull the cork out of this cork barrel. In case if you're wondering, yes, they do make a tool to do that. This is a larger one for bass trombones. This is a smaller one for tenor trombones. And I'll show you what it looks like. This is a tube that goes around the inner side tube, and at the end there's a little hook that pulls out the cork. It goes around the slide tube, and then you push it in to get a hold of the cork, and then you twist and pull as you go, and that pulls it out. Sometimes it comes apart. Okay, this one has felts. Some people use cork, some people use felts. Either one will work. So you have to turn it and keep the tension on as you turn it. Okay, there's some cork and felt in there. Now I can put these slides in there and they will line up evenly. I just need to solder one solder joint for the inner slide, but this is a very tricky solder joint, and for whatever reason there's a large gap in between there. Let me show you what that looks like. See how there is a big gap there? That is way too big of a gap. If I soldered it, it would make a big mess and it would not be a good solder joint, and it would also not hold up well. So what I'm going to do is I have to heat this up and slide this brace over. There are two braces with a tube in the middle, and both of those can be heated up and you can melt the solder and slide this in and out. I can see a little bit of solder on this one, so probably what happened sometime in the past is someone heated up the solder and pushed these together. What I'm going to do is pull those back apart, and the way I'm going to do that is put some solder clips. I have to line that up again. Okay, put some solder clips on there. So what the solder clips are going to do is pull the brace in as soon as it gets hot enough. I'm not going to be soldering right now. What I'm going to do is just heat up this joint and watch what happens. As soon as it gets up to temperature, you should hear it move, or either that or see it move. Okay, it should be getting close. Okay, well the solder is melted and it's not moving. Maybe I need to help it a little bit. Oh, and let's see here. It does not seem to want to move. It could be stuck in there. I think it is stuck in there. I'm going to have to help it. So what I'm going to do is heat that up to temperature and then hold on to this and pull it out. I'm going to pull off the solder clamps, and I am using a cloth to do that because they're probably pretty hot. I don't want to hurt myself. Okay, let's see what we have now. It doesn't seem like it moved enough. I gave this time to cool off so I can touch it now, and I'm not sure if it is good or not. So what I'm going to do is pull this out. There is a little gap in between the inner and outer slide tubes all the way around. The reason for the gap is the slide tubes only touch at the end of the slide where the stocking is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this off to one side like that, and I'm going to see if they touch both of the sides at the same time, and they're pretty close. These appear to be pretty close, so the width of the inner side tubes are very close to what they should be. So what I'm going to do now is solder this brace onto the cork barrel, and I may need to change things after I'm done because a lot of times things shift a little bit. Also, if this solder joint melts when I am soldering the brace together, Because this is going to be hot, there's going to be a lot more air pressure in there, and these braces are going to want to come apart, and that's going to change everything for the Handslide. When I am done with the solder joint and everything is cooled off, the inner slide tubes need to be the exact right amount apart so that they fit into the outer slide tubes exactly right. If the inner slide tubes are not exact, then when you pull the slide into first position, it's going to pinch the outer slide tubes and it's going to make them get stuck in first and maybe second position. What I'm going to do now is put these clips back on there. I'm going to try not to melt this solder joint in the process so that it stays the right width apart. I'm heating this up a little bit, and then I'll put the flux on there. So I'm going to heat up the cork barrel a little more than I'm going to heat up the brace, and that's so that the solder joint, the other solder joint on the brace, does not melt. And I'm going to get the, this is not my best solder joint I've ever done. I guess that's what happens when I'm on video. Oh, it's really a bad solder joint. Okay, that one's definitely going to need some cleanup. Okay, I need to make sure that the solder goes around like it's supposed to. Okay, it's hard to see it. It's hard to see the bottom, and I do not want to move this at all until it cools off. So, okay, this is cooled off now. I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to take these off too. These are not needed anymore. Okay, the solder did get in there most of the way. I see that there's a little too much gap in there, so I'm going to use a flange burnisher. What this does is it bends the flange a little bit so that it can meet up with the cork barrel. And also there's a little too much gap right there. Usually I do this before I solder, but on this one I kind of had to solder it to get everything into position. So there were a few gaps in there, but I'm going to take care of that now. And now I'm going to, so now I need to put a little bit more solder into there. If I do not melt the entire solder joint at one time, I do not need the clips. So I'm just heating up the one side, and I'm being careful not to put too much heat on there, like the exact right amount of heat, just to do the one side of the solder joint. And then I'll give that a few seconds to cool off. And then I'm going to do the other side. Now I'm going to finish up the other part. Now I neutralize the flux. Now I need to clean off the excess solder. I'm going to do that the same way I did the other solder joint. Yeah, I did make a mess out of this one. Sometimes that happens. Actually, it happens quite a bit. I try to do good clean solder joints, but a lot of times it does not work out like it should. Now I'm going to check to see if this is the right width. So I'm going to pull that out, pull it off to one side. It's very close. I finished soldering on the Handslide, and in theory everything should be straight and parallel and the right width and everything. So I'm going to test it out and see how it slides. I'm a little nervous checking this out. I hope this works well. It's not going to be perfect. I do not expect it to be, but I hope it's not really bad. I have not checked it yet, so you're going to know the same time I do how it works. So let's see. I'm going to point it down. Okay, not great. Okay, let's see what we have. Yeah, it's not good. First position is worse, leading me to believe that I may need to change the width of the inner slide a little bit. I'm going to move so that it's perpendicular to the camera so that you can see the exact angles it slides out at. So if I pull it out a little bit, it starts to slide about right there. And if I put it in all the way, it has to be at about a 40-degree angle. It has to be down farther. I got the slide all together. Now I need to work with the slide to get it to slide better, but that is for the next video. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm determined to have the trombone finished by the end of the next video.